Hi there, and welcome to the Wandering Desk podcast, the podcast about living, working, and hanging out abroad, wherever the heck that is. In a previous episode, I talked about my experience in Bali, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you about how I learned to ride a scooter and how it was the making of my trip there. I'm going to go into what it's like actually riding a scooter in Bali, how I went about it, the good, the great, and the downright dangerous. And at the end, I'll give you a few tips for in case you're thinking of doing the same thing yourself. So buckle up. There are no buckles on bikes. And off we go. So as I said in the previous episode about Bali, I really didn't like Bali when I arrived. In fact, my first instinct was I really hated it, actually, because it was just so far from what I wanted. And if you listen to that episode, as you know, I grew in the end to love it. Now, there were various reasons why I didn't like it when I arrived. There was the heat and the humidity of it, because it was in wet season. I was arriving straight from Central Eastern Europe. There was I had jet lag and sleep issues, and so I don't think that helped. Expectations of paradise versus the actual reality, with all just bikes everywhere and craziness. You know, you see these legs by the pool and you're expecting that, and my legs don't look anything like that. And there aren't pools on the street as well, so you have to. These places do exist, by the way, of course, but just when you arrive, it's not maybe what you were expecting. It certainly wasn't what I was expecting. And one of the other things was just how hard it was to get around on foot as a pedestrian. Things are kind of spread out and the pavements aren't great. And you end up having to choose where you're going to stay based on where you want to be, if you know you're going to be walking around. Additionally to this, there are smartphone-based services, but they're very strongly controlled. You can't use them. You have I think there used to be Uber. I don't think there is now, but they have Grab and Gojek, which are smartphone apps where you can hail either a car or you can hail a motorbike, and then you can jump on the back of a motorbike and they have a spare helmet or whatever else. But you can't use those apps in certain areas. These areas are controlled. There's a group that basically says, no, you can't do this. And they'll actually cause problems for drivers who try to give these services to tourists. I think it's okay if you're a local, but they're just trying to control that because these are very cheap and, it's arguably underpriced for tourists. I guess a lot of this depends on whether you think tourists should pay the same as locals or more. I know at times it can be annoying if you have to pay a different amount. I'm happy to pay more as long as I don't feel like I'm being fleeced. But anyway, so you have this problem where if you want to get anywhere, it actually starts to work out really quite expensive for Bali. I think normally most short trips were about 50,000 rupiah, which is, it's only £2.50. But if every time you want to go anywhere, you're paying that, then that adds up, especially if you've gone there because you're actually trying to have a relatively affordable holiday or break, or do you want to do the digital nomad thing somewhere where you can, it makes the economics of your business work, essentially. And also you don't want to it takes away your autonomy if you're having to take lifts everywhere all the time. And on top of all this, there's almost no public transport. You get the odd sort of shuttle bus or whatever else, but that's about it. So, it was sort of a real problem. Walking along as a pedestrian, I've got to say, is really difficult. In some places, the pavements are pretty decent. There's a proper flat pavement with a solid curb. But in a lot of places, what you've got is you have businesses, you have various shops and things like that, little warungs, little local shops selling all sorts of things and with petrol out the front, whatever else. And you have like a shop apron. You have this sort of apron of concrete which slopes down to the road and it just meets the road. And in fact, and it sort of bleeds into the road. So, it's not really always that distinct where the road ends. And when the road gets really busy, people on bikes will start going on that sort of concrete apron as well. And there are all sorts of things parked on there. And a lot of the time you also have drainage channels, and sometimes the concrete slabs covering the drainage channels are broken and you end up walking on the road. Sometimes there's no pavement at all. You've got road and then a drainage channel and then a paddy field. So now you're definitely on the road. And it's actually quite stressful. And it feels like it's probably even safer to be on a bike, no matter how chaotic it looks. And when you see it, you're thinking, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to do that. But at the same time, walking on the road doesn't feel very safe either. And crossing the road, certain roads that are busy, that's a bit of a nightmare as well. There's some roads you just look at it thinking, there's just no chance. It'd almost be easier for me to stop a bike and get on the back of the bike and then have the bike do some kind of a U-turn rather than actually walk across it as a flesh and blood sort of squashable human being, you know? So, but what was stopping me doing this? Why didn't I just jump on a scooter anyway? Well, there were a number of things. First of all, I didn't have the right license. So I had just a typical car license. Mine actually, because I got it before a certain date, it's a British license, and it actually does allow me to have a moped, scooter, whatever you want to call it, up to, I think it's either up to 49cc or up to 50cc. It's that sort of vicinity. Now, that is not what the bikes are in Bali. I think I'm told you can find them if you look really hard, but actually most of the bikes out there, ones that are what you would call a scooter or a moped, they're 110cc. So engine capacity is over twice what I'd be allowed to use, or maybe 125, some are as well. And upwards, of course, from there, but most of them are around that sort of mark. And for that, you need to have a proper motorbike license. And it turns out you also need an IDP, an international driving permit, with the motorbike box ticked, which I didn't have either. So yeah, you need that. Now that means I wasn't insured. So, I mean, first of all, I didn't, it's not ideal going to a country anyway. You don't really want to go there and break the rules. And secondly, you're not insured. So even because this is one of the things, a lot of people do that, but if you have an accident, you might have insurance, but the insurance will often say, well, you're covered as long as you could ride this bike legally, both in the country you're in and back home. Now, I've heard of numerous times when this has happened where I remember reading a news story about some poor guy had an accident in Vietnam. He broke both his legs, and the air ambulance home cost him, I can't remember if it was £10,000 or £20,000. And this was like 10 years ago. I think I read it in a local paper out in Vietnam. And he wasn't covered by his insurance. He tried to claim, and they said, well, no, I think he was legal riding it in Vietnam, but he wasn't legal riding it back home. So they said, no, we're not going to pay. And he had to pay. He had to find the money for that. And that is not a high amount of money for that sort of situation either. I mean, it really can go up into scores of thousands of pounds or dollars or whatever. So the third thing was that the roads are crazy, and that really struck me when I arrived. I mean, it just looks like mayhem. Of course, you don't watch a single bike and see where it goes. What you just see is this crazy, roaring mess of bikes, essentially. This just tangled, like spaghetti pathways of bikes all going different ways. And you're thinking, there's no way I'm going to go out into that. And so, fourthly, my own relative inexperience. Having a license, for instance, is not just about having a license. It's about having learned how to do the thing that you're licensed to do, isn't it? It's about having that experience and having that ability and learning how to do it. And I've ridden other things before. I've done a lot of cycling. I've done a lot of I've been on those little electric skate scooters, which do actually go quite fast. They go up to like nearly 30 kilometers an hour. But this is a different thing again, with a different set of skills. And although obviously my license says, oh, you can do that, well, can I? So there was that as well. And as I mentioned in the previous episode, it was really after, I don't know, I just reached a point where I was just like, I've got to do something about this, because it was one of the things that was stopping me really enjoying myself in Bali and feeling happy, because it was presenting an obstacle to everything. So even after I'd acclimatized to the heat and I got my sleep in order, I was still just constantly schlepping around on the road, avoiding bikes, and thinking, everyone else is doing this. I'm getting this wrong. I've just got to have a go at this. So I decided that I'd go for it, and I rented a scooter from the place I was staying at. This is quite common. Most places that you stay at, this was in Canggu, most places they either have bikes themselves or they'll point you somewhere that has bikes. They'll get one for you or something like that. So the place I stayed at, they had a few scooters, and the guy gave me a helmet and I put that on, and he was explaining how it works. So obviously had some inkling that I wasn't completely 100% an expert at this. And, you have to like hold the brake to start the bike, and you have to flick the stand up or it won't start, and this kind of stuff. So we'd started the engine and I was trying to turn it round, because a lot of Bali is these little alleys, In fact, a lot of the accommodation is it's like courtyarded. So you'll have like these undulating, like castellated kind of walls going around a compound, and then a number of buildings within the compound which are raised up. And then you have like a little courtyard area. And often to get into these courtyards of all the buildings you've got like a ramp up and a ramp down again. And even to get to that bit, maybe you have to go down a little side alley or something. Well, I was down one of these side alleys and I was trying to turn the bike around, and it was a bit tight and the bike was quite heavy, and they are quite heavy, just sort of pushing it manually. So I kind of twisted the handle a bit. It was one of these sort of twist and go, as I'm told they're called, things. So there's no gears on this thing. And I tried to, I just turned the throttle a little bit, and and I nearly just launched it into a load of other parked bikes, nearly just lost it completely. So that was lesson number one, and the guy looked at me, he was like, have you ridden one of these before? And I was like, oh yeah. Maybe that's not what you should say in those circumstances. Maybe I should have fessed up. I knew I was going to be okay. I'm mechanically and in terms of balance and all this, and I've ridden all sorts of different vehicles. And so I kind of, I knew I'd grasp this very quickly, but I thought I just needed to settle his nerves as much as mine. I was like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I'm like, jeez. I think, additionally to this, one of the things is that if you're not used to this, we all have an idea. Let's say you've never ridden a bike. We all know the whole rev up thing. You twist your right hand to rev up, right? But it's not actually that intuitive when you do it, in the sense that, let's say you're on the bike and you twist back. It's not that intuitive. As it starts getting away from you, you're like, whoa, it's not that intuitive to then unwind that hand to turn it back the other way. That's learnt, right? So that's one of the things that I didn't realize. And I think you sort of panic a little bit. And I have seen some darkly comic gifs of people on like a paved pathway with a paddy field next to it, and with a drop off. I mean, I've seen people, launching the bike off one of those, and saw someone else trashing a load of other bikes with their bike because he just got on it, and they've accelerated, and then they're going, oh no, what do I do now? I'm going too quickly. How do I stop? And that is not the environment in which you want to be working out how to stop accelerating. It seems so easy, but the moment it starts getting away from you, you panic and you're not thinking clearly. So there's that. So I got it back under control anyway, and yeah, and then went off, and deliberately went off slowly at my own pace, quiet roads, nothing else around me, and just getting a feel for the balance and all the rest of it, and all around you, and then when there are other bikes, everyone's coming past me, that's fine. I'm just trying to make sure I keep out of everyone's way and not do anything strange or unexpected. And it took about 3 or 4 days of doing these sort of short, easy learning journeys to get used to it. And the first day in particular was tricky. The first day was like a hazard perception video, because even though I was trying to stay out of trouble, I was trying to stay out of everyone's way, you can't do that completely, especially if you're actually trying to go somewhere. I had tourists stepping out in front of me. I had, you got people swinging around you on both sides, hen and chickens going across the road, just like, okay. I mean, yeah. I had a ball came flying over a gate and just bounced across the road in front of me. There was a woman just came out with a bucket of water and just threw the water across the road in front of the bike. It was just like, did someone pay you? What is this? And So yeah, like a friend said to me, is it's like, as I described it, they said to me, it's like a hazard perception video, just like you have to spot all the issues. So that was the hardest day, really, and I gradually got used to it. And you're just picking up little things on every day. So, like for instance, at first I was just riding the brakes the whole time, and then I realized that this isn't a good thing to do. So I'm going along, I've got one hand on the throttle and the other hand on the brake. Well, that's not going to work because it's really confusing. If you have to brake suddenly, now I don't take this as any kind of, this is not my guidance or instruction, because I'm self-taught and I'd be very interested. I really do want to go and do a motorcycle course now and find out, what are the best techniques. But what I learned was for myself was that it didn't seem like a good idea to hold onto the brake and actually accelerate with the other hand, because when you need to stop, it complicates things so much. It's actually better not to have your hand on the brake. Well, that's what I found. And then so I could, undo the throttle and then brake. And that seemed to me to be the best way, rather than sort of riding the brake just in terror that something might happen. And that is a reasonable thing to do in a way. It's an understandable reaction to be in that state, because there are a lot of hazards on the road and there are things happening around you all the time, and you have to stay aware. And in fact, one of my fears was becoming too comfortable and not losing that sort of slight edge of anxiety that I think you want to be confident, but I don't think you want to lose that sense that something could happen at any time, because actually it really, really can in Bali. Anyway, so in those first few days, it was really learning how to steer, which is actually, there's not that much steering goes on. It's actually leaning. In fact, I'm told, and I don't know if I was doing this without realizing it, but I'm told you actually sort of, when you lean into the corner, you actually turn slightly the other way. It's the gyroscopic effect. I don't know if that's true. I was looking out for it. I didn't notice myself doing it, but really, yeah, turning into the corners, you're not turning the wheel, you're leaning. And so it's all about balance and learning how to indicate and use the lights. At first I was signaling, and then to try and cancel signal, I was signaling the other way and trying to find it in the middle. And you don't. You just, on the bikes I was on anyway, you signal and then you press it, and that cancels it. Learning all the different reasons why the bike won't start. Honestly, I had this so much. I'd be like, oh no, it's broken. It's like, oh no, it's the stand's down. And then you put the stand up and it still won't start. Oh, no, it's because the indicator's on. So you cancel the indicator. It still won't start. Oh, it's because you need to hold the brake. And then it still won't start. And you're like, oh yeah, it's because you have to put that special liquid in that chamber that you're sitting on, isn't it? Actually, I didn't have that. I nearly ran out of fuel. It was only through not working out why is this thing not starting that I checked the fuel and thought, well, it has started, but that needle pointing at that red thing, I don't think that's the natural position where it should be. So I had to go and fill it up, and that's another one of those things. And I think it's quite good that when you get a bike and you're first starting out like that. I should say, by the way, I don't recommend this as a way of starting. I want to make that clear. I don't think what I did was good. It wasn't good for me. You can argue, I thought about things. Was it irresponsible? I don't think so, in the sense that, it's like, I did have a license to ride mopeds. So obviously the license giver people don't think that it's an issue. And I certainly did it in as responsible way as I could do. But I do think I don't think it's ideal. Let's put it that way. Anyway, so it is like a twist and go, so you don't have to worry about the gears and that sort of stuff. But at some point, you've got to put petrol in it, right? So you have to work out how that works. Now, there are full-on petrol stations, but they're quite rare. And the normal thing, in fact, is to go to these little warungs, which are the sort of family-run shops. They're like grocery stores, and they sell a little bit of everything. Warung can also mean like a little cafe selling local Indonesian food as well. And they have the shops, however, they have these little like mobile, it's like a little mobile trolley thing with petrol in. And what you have is a couple of cylinders rising up, and it's hand pumped. What they do is it's gravity fed. So they lift up the seat of the bike, you click it open with your keys, and then they take the lid off and they put the petrol in it, and it's in a cylinder and it drops down against gradation. So you say to them, I want I just say 10, like 10,000 rupiah. And then it would go down the gradations, and then they put 10 to where it says 10,000 and then that's it, and you give them the money. And then to get it back up into that cylinder, I think there was some kind of a pump. I think it was a handle that they turned or something. Actually, they did say, like, which one do you want? Because there's two, and there's like a greenish one and a yellowish one, or a greeny bluey one and a yellowy one. And I'm like, I don't know, mate. No idea. I'm not sure how much it matters. I think they're mostly just different grades. I don't think it's like diesel and petrol, thankfully. But like on one occasion, I mean, I did have someone looking at my tank at one point. I know that I had each of the different type at some points. I didn't notice the difference, but like I said, I think it's like octane rating or something along those lines. Anyway, so yeah, you fill up and then you have a little kind of, oh yeah, you feel like you've achieved something. Sometimes they don't even have that. In fact, what I just said, sometimes they don't even have these sort of little mini filling stations, these little mini pump things. In some places, they just have glass bottles, and you go up and they'll just, these are fixed amounts, and they'll just empty it into your tank. And I remember thinking, like, oh God, that's like, imagine if you just start on your bike and you do that thing I was saying, accelerating, you go into a load of those. I was thinking, God, you want to do that. And then I read in one of the local newspapers, like an English language Canggu community newspaper, and it's really bad. Someone actually had this accident not long after, while I was out there, basically. Here we are. As reported by Coconuts Bali, a motorcycle driver has died in Denpasar after crashing into a traditional warung selling food and other stuff along with petrol stored in glass bottles. Skipping to the next bit. The victim allegedly lost control over his bike and crashed into the stall, breaking through a wooden wall, smashing dozens of petrol-filled glass bottles. Flames from the gas cooking stove met with the spilled petrol, and within minutes the wooden stall was ablaze. So it is genuinely, it's like, it's as, it doesn't look safe and it isn't safe, right? And that's just the way it is. And I think if you're going to go out there on a bike, that's the kind of thing that you have to accept is a risk. So, yeah. Anyway, I was gradually growing in confidence as I did this. I started off, like I said, with the quieter roads and then graduated to sort of slightly bigger roads. I made a pact with myself to keep it to 30 kilometers an hour. I felt like that was a reasonable speed. And like I said, I've been whizzing around on these little lime scooters in Warsaw it goes up to 27 kilometers an hour. I wanted to go at a speed that I felt like if something happened, then the outcome can't be particularly, it still can be bad, but it just to keep the chances lower. Of course, if you have a head on with something, then you've got to add the speeds together. So it can still, two people going 30 is a 60 kilometers an hour accident, right? But at the same time, just trying to keep that down to a manageable thing and not let myself get too excited and get away with it. Because, of course, when you're on a bike, or as you get confident with it, it's like, this is great. And the feeling I find when you, just the subtle shifts of body weight, it's so nice feeling the way that makes the bike move. And you actually start to feel like, it is actually an enjoyable experience about being in that. I guess it's that state of flow, isn't it? It's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's flow states where you're kind of, you've got to a point where I won't say I was an expert, but you've mastered the basics at the very least, and you can just you're moving into the territory of more nuanced driving now. As I got more confident, I started to use one of the busier roads. And then as I got more confident still, I started using something called the shortcut. Now, the shortcut is this thing everyone knows this. Everyone knows this who goes to Bali, right? It's legendary, the shortcut. Basically, Bali is the south part of Bali is a series of beaches, and the beaches are separated by water inlets. So you don't tend to get a coastal road right next to the coast. Instead, what you have is roads going out parallel to the coast. So you've got a beach with a road heading out from it, and then another beach a bit further down with another road heading out from it. And they're all joined together by a road that's a few kilometers inland. So let's say you're on one beach and you want to go to the next beach, then what you're going to have to do is, theoretically, you'd have to ride your bike all the way up to the connecting road, which is a nightmare, by the way. It's a really busy road. And then along and then back down. And it's like the other beach might only be a few hundred meters away, but you're doing like a 6 or 7 kilometer round trip. And yeah, it's a bit crazy. So you don't want to be doing that. So to shorten journey times between two of those roads that head out from the beaches, between them are typically paddy fields. And what happened was there was a path between two of these roads, right? And then apparently, I think the history is something like it was a path and then it became paved and it was just for motorcycles. Then it sort of grew bigger and then it became like motorcycles and cars using it as well. And that's what you've got now. And now it's almost like it does flow at times and other times it's a traffic jam and it's not really wide enough for cars. And yet you still end up with like two cars, like one trying to like cars coming in both directions. And so, like, at some point, I'm told by people that live there that there's an accident every day or somebody ends up in the paddy field every day. Because this is the thing, this path, it's not the height of the paddy field, it's raised, which makes sense because, the paddy fields are often, they're usually flooded, aren't they? That's the nature of how those fields, those crops grow. So there's a drop off of, it varies. It might just be a couple of feet at times and sometimes it's a bit more. And so there are all these photos that you'll see of like, cars on the side and people on the bike in the field and all this. So it's a treacherous thing to take if you're just starting out because you don't want to get it wrong. And if you lose your balance, see, this is the thing about balance. If you lose your balance, then you're in the paddy field, right? So you don't really want to be doing that. And you certainly don't want to be going there with a pillion passenger. So that for me was something I graduated to doing. And once I started doing that a few times, that was a real buzz. That was great, like taking the shortcut. I loved it. Any excuse. Oh, it looks like I might have to use the shortcut again. Oh dear. And then after that, I graduated to that busier road that joined all those main roads. And that was another level on from that, And, it's just people weaving this way and that, and then eventually going on that, doing what I was saying before, when you're pedestrian, which is annoying when you're a pedestrian, which is going on all the bikes are going on the concrete apron on one side, or they're pulling out and going against the oncoming traffic. You drive on the left in Indonesia, or theoretically, because then the cars sort of pull out and the drivers will do anything to get by. The bikes, essentially, as an American put it to me, it's like water. They flow like water. It's like an exercise in fluid dynamics, watching the bike sort of flowing around cars. So yeah, that was the next stage. And then I don't, it took a bit, it's a bit frightening and you're living on your wits a little bit, but then even that is something that you get used to. I think New Year's Eve was some of the craziest as well. I was riding on New Year's Eve. I went down one back street because people are crazy and a lot of people have been drinking and shouldn't have. I mean, that's terrible. Don't do that. I went down one back alley though, and there was like, this woman said to me, I was taking it easy because it's a back alley. There are pedestrians, it's a paved back alley, and the pedestrians as well. And I always think if you have that mixed sort of use space, you got to go at the speed of pedestrians really, unless there's no one around. And I went past, and there's this British woman turned to me, and she was like going, "Some of you other bike people, you just came through it really fast." And she was annoyed with me at the bike people. And you bike people, she said it was something like that. You bike people, you're coming in through here really fast. It was something like that. And I was just like, well, hold on. We're not, we're not the bike people. It's like, we don't all know each other. We don't all anyway. Well, obviously when I went to the bike people meeting later, I told all the other ones and we all had a good laugh about that. And they were saying, yeah, we totally buzzed her, Anyway, so after New Year, and I went away to the Gili Islands for a bit and I came back and I was based in Ubud and I was just sort of pootling around town a bit. And then I think this is the natural progression. You kind of build up your confidence a bit. And then I started going on slightly longer journeys. I was a bit wary of going on the longer journeys. And one of the reasons was that, I knew I didn't have the right license. And, with hindsight, this is not right. This is what I've got to say. This is what most people do. That doesn't mean it's right, but this is what most people do. And I've seen on Facebook groups, because there's some really good Facebook groups there, and you have a really good mixture of local Balinese people and tourists and digital nomads and then long-term expats, whatever you want to call them. And one thing that I've noticed cropping up there is locals hate the arrogance of foreigners turning up and just going, oh, well, I haven't got the right license, but who fucking cares? And just doing it anyway. And, they're right. they're right. I wouldn't dream of going to France or the USA or Australia with the wrong license. And I think, doing it just because you can get away with it, that's not right. So for that reason, if I go again, then I want to do something about it. I want to do it properly, At the same time, this is, this kind of like, the situation is, I think I read this on Facebook, but there was some guy who he got stopped by the police, and they stopped him and they checked his license, and he had the right license, and they had his IDP as well. And the policeman was basically saying, look, can I have a photo of you? Because you're the first person I've ever come across who's got all the right documentation. So it doesn't, you are the exception, but I don't think that makes it okay. Anyway, so yeah, I moved to Ubud, and what happened at one point was that I was hanging around in Ubud. I was just pootling around town, going between my accommodation and the co-working space and cafes and restaurants, whatever else. Taking the odd trip out to, there's some local paddy fields you can go up to. It's a really touristy spot. I think they are actually in use. There are people using these paddy fields, but it's like spectacular sort of terraces, rice terraces. But that's not really that far away. And then they are really quiet roads. Now, I needed to go and pick up my visa from Canggu. And to do that, well, I couldn't pick up an Uber type thing like a Grab or a Gojek, because you can't in Ubud. They won't pick you up because of this sort of arrangement. So what I thought was, what I'll do is I'll ride out to the next village and I'll park my bike up, and then I'll get one there. And I went out to the next village, and I noticed that none of the bikes where I'd parked up had the helmets, because normally you park up, you put your helmet on the wing mirror, say. And then none of them had them there. And I thought, is this a safe place to park it? Because normally people are happy leaving their helmets there. So then I went on to the next place, and then basically I just kept going. I kept going and stopping, and then carrying on and just edging it like a bit further away each time. And eventually when I looked at the map, I thought, I'm actually halfway there. Why don't I just carry on? So I did. I just carried on, and I went all the way, and it's about an hour away, right? It's only 15 miles, but it's like there's no proper full-on main roads. It's all relatively small roads. And for me, by this point, even though I graduated from 30 kilometers an hour, basically my top speed was 40 if there's other traffic and 50 if there's nothing else, kilometers an hour. So not very high. Again, I'm just thinking, I want to minimize if something happens unexpected. I just don't want there to be any outcome. I don't mind arriving 10 minutes late anywhere. It's not an issue. Speed isn't the issue here. Time is something I'm rich on. So yeah, I thought, yeah, why not? It was a really nice, it was a nice day, and I had my phone plugged in with the one earbud in, one ear under my helmet, playing music, and with like Google Maps giving me the directions. And yeah, I just carried on and went all the way. And then parked up, met up with a Latvian friend for lunch, and had a nice lunch, and it was just all really nice. And I brought my laptop. I think I did a bit of work there. And then when I was sat there in this cafe, sort of mid-afternoon, it started raining. And then it started raining quite heavily. And then it was blowing as well. And like in this cafe, because it's one of these open-sided cafes with like a really calming, serene view of rice fields out the back, sitting there having some kind of fruit juice or whatever. And then what happened was the wind, because it was really windy, it was raining hard, like proper, like, because it's wet season. So sometimes it can get pretty ferocious, the rain, and it was blowing hard, and they put down these shutters, and even the shutters that were struggling, they had to lash the shutters down because the wind was whipping them and the rain was hitting them and all this. And so I just thought I'd sit this out, and I stayed for an hour, and then I stayed for another hour. And it was just raining constantly. The wind dropped, but it just wasn't stopped raining, and not light rain either. It wasn't like torrential, but it was heavy enough. And I didn't have any kind of, you don't ride with an umbrella, so an umbrella helmet, one of those caps you can get. But I didn't have a poncho or anything like that, and it's not ideal. Now, I'd ridden before in the rain just once, and it's hard work, and especially because the helmets haven't got, a lot of the time the helmets don't have visors on them. They're open face helmets, and then the visors end up getting scratched a bit. So you either push it back or it just gets taken off, But anyway, I was trying to wait this out, And then it started getting the sunset, and it was getting darker. I'm like, maybe I just have got to make a move for this. And I went to a warung, and I was waiting there, and I was seeing if they had a poncho, and they didn't. And then the woman there was looking up at the skies, and she said, "Oh, it's going to be like this till morning." I'm like, "Oh God!" I didn't have anything with me. I suppose with hindsight, I should have just stayed. I should have just stayed at a hostel, and that'd have been fine. Why not? But some part of me wanted to get back that evening, and maybe I didn't have enough money. I think there was some reason. But anyway, so I went on to the next place. And even in that, I had to wait for the rain to calm down a bit. And even then, going between two places, because when you're going along, you're not, obviously it shortens the amount of time, but you're collecting all the rain that's hanging in the air, that's slowly dropping at the pace of gravity. You collect all that. You get pretty wet on a bike. And so I stopped at the next warung, and they had a poncho. And then I stopped somewhere and got some dinner and waited, and it still wasn't clearing up. And eventually I just had to go. And, it's an hour back, and this is more sort of like uphill. It was in the dark. Obviously you've got lights on the bike, but there's not much lighting going on these roads. And like I said, open face helmet, and it's going between sort of moderate rain to heavy rain. And all this rain's flying at you. Basically, you've got like your glasses are getting steamed up, and you've got to kind of deal with that. And because you've got this poncho on, you put the poncho on, and it covers your knees and stuff, and you kind of tuck it in. You've got your bag underneath the poncho, whatever. But it's you don't put your hood over the helmet. That's just silly. And if you have it loose, then you're going to get, because it's raining heavily, you're going to get wet. So you put the hood up, and then you put the helmet over the hood, right? And then that sort of amplifies the sort of this condensation and the sort of steaming up of the glasses. So you're getting steamed up on the back, and the front, they're just covered with rain, and it's not running off. And you're riding into that. And you're sort of trying to angle your head so you can look past the glasses, look past the rain, and stop the rain hitting you so much. And you're also like the vehicle's coming towards you. It's dazzling because of all the light is being bounced all which way by the rain, the headlights of the oncoming vehicles. It was tough. It's some of the toughest driving I've ever done, and really did not enjoy me. And the wind was sort of buffeting me, and you're just kind of searching through it, trying to make progress, trying to do it safely. It was stressful. It was not in the slightest bit enjoyable. So I did learn something that day about that. I think really just next time I'd just sit it out, and I'd be better equipped. I think maybe get a helmet with a visor and stuff. Like I said, it's a problem because the visors end up rolling around on the floor, over if it's a rental one, and it gets all scratched or whatever else. But and it becomes a pain because the screws on the side are sort of aren't as tight as they should be. And as you're riding along, if you push the plastic visor up, it just gradually starts bobbing back down as you go over bumps and stuff. But there must be something that can be done about that. So I don't think I would do that again in future, or I'd do it a different way anyway. But after that, everything seemed easy by comparison. That was my sort of trial by rain. And I have driven in other sort of wet conditions as well. The roads in Bali, especially if you're up in the hills, when it's rained a bit, you might not be in the rain, but all the runoff, it comes on the roads, and it's like a river. You can't, it's quite dangerous in a different way, because especially if you're sort of driving to the margin of the road, because you've got to be careful. All you can see is the water, and for all you know, there's a drainage ditch there. So that's not ideal. And there could be like a big pothole, and if you hit that and you do it in 30, whatever, 30 is not much, but if the pothole's big enough, you'd still have a spill, wouldn't you? So, I should be clear about this. Accidents are a serious problem in Bali. And it's not a surprise at all, because cars will pull out into traffic and expect bikes to go around them. Like I said, it's like, fluid dynamics. It's very different to certainly to what I've seen in the UK. I've never ridden a motorbike in the UK, but, it's very different. And this is the driving style now, no one waits for a gap. They just blend in. If you want to turn right across, you've got to go across the first the carriageway coming the other way, and you're not going to wait for a gap in the other side. You're just going to blend. You're going to stick to the outside essentially. And often what you'll see is that bikes, when they want to turn right and they can't get across the lane that they need to cross, they'll just start heading against the traffic, almost in the gutter kind of thing, like just on the margin of the road, and wait until there's a gap so they can pull across, so they don't have to wait. So they're just at this sort of T-junction waiting. So you've got all that sort of stuff going on. There was the two accidents that I heard the details of were, I heard about lots of accidents when I was there. I didn't see any, thankfully, and I wasn't involved in any, so thankfully. But the two accidents I heard about, it was the same accident. It was a car pulling out, and the person on the bike didn't expect it and hit the car. One I read about in a newspaper, and the other one was actually someone who spoke to me, and they'd said they'd slowed right down after that happened. There's just no need to go at any speed at all. You want, like I was saying, just whatever pace you're going at, so that just go slow enough that if there's an accident, that that it's not going to be fun, of course, but hopefully you reduce your chances that it's going to be serious. So I read about one in a paper, and I've got it here, in fact. So this person had five facial fractures, a shattered kneecap, exposed femur, and tendons and ligaments ripped from the bone. So, that's pretty serious. And that was just, they crashed into the side of a taxi that was pulling out on the road. That's from the Canggu Weekly. So it's really easy for that sort of stuff to happen. You just have to be on high alert, really. You have to try and maintain that level of alertness that something can happen, and not get too relaxed about it. Anyway, back in Ubud, I'd got back, and I'd picked up my visa extension. And so at this point now, I'm feeling I've driven in different conditions and stuff like that, and I know I can do this, and I know I can get a bit further afield now. So I decided I'd get out and explore, and I went to this place called Cedarman, which is about an hour up the road. Now, Cedarman is this little, I'd heard about it from someone on the Gili Islands, and it's this little countryside village, essentially, and it sounded much more like, I think, what I'd expected Ubud to be like. So I'd had a quick look, I'd had a quick Google around to see, and it looked nice, and other people said it was good, so I thought, I'll head out there. I've got to say, pulling out on your bike, because I'd left my accommodation, I checked out, I've got everything in my backpack. I've got like a 40-50 litre backpack, and I put that on my back, and it was sort of adjusted it so it was sitting on the seat behind me, so I didn't have to carry the weight on me, And it feels, what a great feeling. It feels amazing, this sense of like just going out on a bit of an adventure, and this sort of feeling of freedom. And I think way more than being in a car, even though that can be great too. But yeah, I was like, oh yeah, this is good. Whereas you just don't quite know how. You just got you got the road ahead of you. How is this going to work out? So it started off as a main road with a lot of traffic, and eventually things got quite narrow. And I'm doing the same thing again. I've got Google Maps on. I've got listen to music, just enjoying it. One earbud in. You can stop. I know some people who say they just stop and ask people, and maybe that's more adventurous in a way. I quite like the autonomous thing of just taking it easy and having Google Maps sort of say to me every now and then where to go. And so I'm ended up down this quite a small track anyway, and I'm going along, and then into this valley, and the sort of hills rising up on my left, and then Google Maps is in my ear going like, in 300 meters, turn left. And I'm like looking ahead, I'm like, yeah, where? Because all I can see is the side of this hill, this sort of quite steep hill. And then it's like, in 100 meters, turn left. And you're like, yeah, where? Turn left. Yeah, where? Turn left, where? And I'm like, what, up there? And there's like little path going up into the hills. And I'm just like, it didn't, when I was looking at it first, it didn't look feasible. I thought my nose is going to go in the air. I'm just going to go over backwards, basically. It's going to tumbling back down the hillside. But I headed up there, and it wasn't quite as bad as it looked in that respect, but it was so much fun. Like a bit concretey, a little bit gravelly, which is not ideal because, it's not, turns out that's not great on two wheels. But yeah, sort of skitting about on the surface and heading up, winding round, and this is all new to me, and it was fantastic. And ended up going on this little track, and again, it's that sort of sense of freedom, that sense of adventure. And I realized, God, it's been such a while since I've had that feeling of excitement and adventure and just exploration. And I know it's, it's not exactly hardcore, is it? This is Bali, right? But just, the feeling I felt, the sort of the emotion of that and that feeling of exploration, I really enjoyed it. And then I ended up staying at the coolest place ever. I went there to get some writing done, stayed in this place. It was like 200,000 rupees. So, 200,000 rupees, which is about 10 quid, something like that, about $12, $13. And it had this incredible view out, because it was on this hillside that I was talking about, this incredible view out over the valley, over the various different things that they were growing, whatever else. Just amazing. I wrote a blog post about this, and I'll link to that in the show notes. So after staying there for about 5 days, I then carried on. I was thinking, shall I go back? I was like, no. So I went up to there's a number of sort of mountains there, or volcanic undulations, shall we say? And I went up to this one, which was, I think was it Mount Agung, and there's a crater lake up there. So I started heading up there. Now, the road itself wasn't terrifically exciting. It was a kind of mainish road by Bali standards. But it was really quiet. And it was just that sense, again, with the backpack on, that sense of exploration, not quite knowing what I was going to expect. Stopping at a little restaurant on the way, tiny little place to get some noodles. And it was the least I'd ever paid for any food there, because it was just really kind of just not a touristy place at all, which, I think, I was a tourist, I'm not trying to say anything else, but at the same time, I think there is a buzz about that if you're doing that kind of thing, isn't there? The feeling that you got off the main track somewhat. Drove up, past one volcano, and then up onto the lip of this crater, and suddenly, just totally unexpectedly, came to this viewing point, and just seeing the crater, the whole crater opening up beneath. Beautiful. And then down, I went down into the crater, and it's like, because it's half lake and then half land, and then there are all sorts of places you can stay there, and there are hikes up there, and I wasn't too bothered about that. But yeah, really, I've done a lot of travel. I've been to a lot of countries, and I've had a lot of experiences, but that, and sometimes things can be like, yeah, I've done this before. I've done something like this before. And I think sometimes you can look hard to find something that has an impact on you, but this really had an impact on me. I really enjoyed it. That sense of the open road, of an open schedule, and just doing what you want to do. I think I'd never really got the motorbike thing before. And you know what? I think I get it now. But all that stuff, all that sort of freedom, freedom from obligations, even sort of self-imposed ones, that sense of freedom from schedules, just freedom. Freedom epitomizes travel in the first place, I think. I know there are, you can have a philosophical discussion about what freedom is in the first place, and that we're all pretty darned free. You know what I mean? If you're a British citizen, you're pretty free, right? But we all have these sort of self-imposed little prisons that we make for ourselves around work and other things, don't we? And even you go on holiday and you create your own little kind of, you can trap yourself in your own set of expectations and in your own obligations to yourself and your own schedule and your own fears and your own sense of things that that's not really the kind of thing that I do, or whatever else. And so, yeah, this was great. This felt like freedom, and I loved it. And it's the kind of thing, I don't know if I want to do it again. There's always a risk that comes with motorcycling, especially in somewhere like Bali. But I'm really, really glad that I did it. So, some tips if you're thinking about doing a similar thing, either because of what I've said, or just maybe you're planning on heading out there anyway. So the first thing I would say is get the right licenses. You need to do your own research on this, find out what you need. But make sure you get the right licenses and get some lessons. So even if you've got the right license, which seems unlikely without having the lessons, but get some lessons. I guess those two things go hand in hand. Get proper insurance. Get the insurance. Make sure that you're covered for riding a motorbike, because you still want to take care, but if you have a bad accident and the problems, you don't want to compound this with suddenly, oh my God, you're in a bad way and you need to suddenly find £50,000 or something, and then you're probably, if you don't have this money yourself, you're pushing it onto friends and relatives. Well, that's not great, is it? So I would say, make sure you've got that right. Wear the right clothes. It's hot out there and it's really tempting to just go all like shirts and t-shirt and stuff like that, especially if you're going to the beach. Who's going to go to the beach with a surfboard on the side and then like pull off like all the, jeans, whatever else. And even then, you see, I wore jeans and I wore quite a light jacket and I just did what I could. I mean, ideally, you probably want leathers, I guess. Again, this is not my area of expertise, but I'm guessing you want that. But who's going to travel in leathers? Who's going to wear leathers in Bali? But I would still say cover up, because if you come off that bike and you're wearing shorts, I've seen what happens to people. I've seen the outcomes of that. So I saw somebody once in South America who'd come off the bike and the jacket had gone up the back and it had taken the skin off the back, and they'd had a jacket on, but it just hadn't been done up properly. It's not nice. So just take the hit on that and wear the proper clothes, including closed shoes on that, I would say. Check the bike and the helmet to make sure what you're riding is okay. Some people buy their own helmets. Get a road legal helmet, because in Bali you can still buy ones. You see people with these leather caps and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's like 1950s Formula One, and it's just like, no, get a helmet where don't get something to look cool. You can get something that still looks pretty cool. You get people riding without helmets. Honestly, it's silly because they don't want to get helmet hair, and yeah, it's not nice. You know what I mean? You take your helmet off, you're like, oh god, look at that, right? But there are worse things than helmet hair, right? Take it slow. I think that'd be my final tip. Would be take it slow. Don't be a hero. You see this all the time, especially in Canggu. You get these people, got them on the short car. They don't want to wait. They think they're above it all. They think they're better than everyone. They come flying past on the outside of everyone. It's just like, well, if they want to do it, let them do it. But don't be that person for your own sake and for others. That's the other type of accident, actually, I've heard of since I came back, which is of like, someone having a head on because they pulled out and they just smashed straight into someone. I think what I did, honestly, I not being an expert, but I when I look back, that was the right approach, which was I set myself a limit and I stuck to the limit, and trying to mentally manage yourself as well, so that someone comes past you, maybe they're being a bit of a jerk, and don't rise to it. They're a jerk, let them go. Just it's easier said than done, but I think, it's like there can be an urge to compete sometimes. It's like, all right, okay. No, just let them go. Who cares? You'll never see them again, or, they'll be gone, whatever. So yeah, set some limits and stick to them. And, self-control, it's a thing. Right, anyway, that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode and learned something about biking in Bali, even if all you've learned is that you don't want to do it yourself. For links and more relating to this episode, including that article about that really cool place, Cedarman, which I'd say, even if you're not doing the biking, go to Cedarman. It's really great. And I'll link to a blog post that I did on that. And I'll show you the guest house so you can go and stay there if it's available, because it's just so cool. Any questions, any thoughts on this episode or anything else, please do send them to me at podcast@wanderingdesk.com, and that's where the show notes are as well, wanderingdesk.com. And if you want, you can record a bit of audio on your phone or whatever and send it in to me, and if it's interesting, then maybe it'll get featured. So yeah, just that really. Until next time, see ya.